Imagine a throne of gold, occupied by a man born in chains. A king wrapped in linen and power, yet marked forever by the title he could never escape, the slave Pharaoh. This isn't the story of Tutankhamun or Ramses the Great. This is the tale of I, the man who rose from the shadows of servitude to rule Egypt in its darkest hour. But how did a man with no divine blood, no rightful claim, take control of the world's most powerful kingdom? This is hidden by time. And this is the story of the Pharaoh who was never meant to rule. Egypt, 14th century BCE. The reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, the heretic king. He was no ordinary ruler. Akhenaten tore down Egypt's gods, closing temples to Amun, and raising the sun disk Aten as the only deity. For centuries, the Egyptians had worshipped a vast pantheon, but Akhenaten dismantled it all. His radical reforms sent shockwaves through society. Priests, stripped of power, simmered with resentment. Nobles lost influence. Generals struggled to keep order in a fractured empire. The empire's wealth drained away. Allies in Syria and Canaan abandoned Egypt. The people suffered famine and hardship. For the first time in living memory, Egypt felt fragile. When Akhenaten died around 1336 BCE, the throne was left in chaos. Into this storm stepped a boy, Tutankhamun, barely 9 years old, a child pharaoh, unable to rule. And behind him stood those who could, among them, a man history calls I. Who was I? That question has haunted Egyptologists for over a century. The records are deliberately unclear. His origins may have been buried by his successors, who sought to erase his memory. Some believe he was once a servant or commoner, a man without noble blood who rose through cunning. Others suggest he was a military scribe, a shadow figure in the courts of generals. A few argue he was linked to Queen Tia, Akhenaten's mother, one of Egypt's most powerful women. Whatever the truth, A clawed his way into power. By the time Tutankhamun was crowned, A was already vizier, advisor, keeper of the state. In ancient Egypt, the vizier was second only to the pharaoh. He oversaw taxation, the courts, the temples. A child king could not rule without him. I had no crown, but he had power. And in Egypt, power was often stronger than blood. Tutankhamun's reign was short, too short to escape those who guided him. At just 19, the boy king was dead. How he died remains a mystery. A broken leg, malaria, or whispers of darker causes, assassination, conspiracy, ritual murder. But what came after revealed even more. His widow, Ankhesenamun, daughter of Akhenaten, wrote a desperate letter to the king of the Hittites, Egypt's sworn enemy. She begged him to send her a prince to marry. Her words are preserved on Hittite tablets. "Never shall I take a servant of mine and make him my husband. I am afraid." She feared losing her freedom, and she feared being forced to marry a man she despised. The Hittite king agreed. He sent his son, but the young man never arrived. He was murdered at the border, ambushed before Egypt could receive him. And soon after, the throne was seized, not by a foreigner, but by the man Ankhesenamun had feared most, I. Around 1323 BCE, A placed the double crown upon his head. But his rule was unlike that of the great pharaohs. His coronation scenes show him marrying Tutankhamun, but soon after she vanishes from history. Was she forced? Did she resist? The records are silent. I wrapped himself in the divine titles of kingship, but his monuments were small, hastily carved, as if even he doubted the permanence of his reign. Later, kings erased his name, chiseling away his memory as though he had never lived. When Tutankhamun was buried in the Valley of the Kings, it was A who performed the funeral rites. In Egyptian tradition, this was no small act. To bury the king was to declare yourself heir, to claim the throne, not just by law, but by the gods. I buried a king, and in doing so, he crowned himself. Yet his own tomb was modest. A pharaoh with power, but never legitimacy. A ruler, but not a god. His reign lasted barely 4 years. No great campaigns, no towering monuments, no enduring glory. His greatest accomplishment was survival. In a court of enemies, priests who hated him, generals who resented him, nobles who saw him as a usurper, I clung to power, but only for a moment. When he died, the throne passed to Horemheb, a general waiting in the shadows. Horemheb erased A's name, defaced his monuments, declared himself rightful heir to Tutankhamun. I was struck from history, not for his deeds, but for what he represented. That the throne of Egypt could be taken, not inherited. For a civilization built on divine kingship, that truth was too dangerous to remember. For centuries, I was forgotten, his tomb half lost, his name erased. It was not until the 20th century that archaeologists pieced his story together. Fragments of inscriptions, stray references, broken tomb walls. And yet, the full truth of A remains hidden. Was he truly a servant who rose to power? A usurper who seized what was never his? Or a relative who exploited chaos to claim the throne? Perhaps he was hated not for his birth, but for what he revealed. That even the mightiest empire could be ruled by an ordinary man. Imagine the throne of Egypt, the golden mask, the whispers of the gods. Now imagine it worn by a man the world called unworthy, a man who buried kings, married queens, and never escaped the chains of his birth. I, the slave Pharaoh. He was not remembered with honor. He was remembered with silence. And perhaps that silence is the loudest legacy of all. This is hidden by time. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and check out our other videos uncovering the dark, forgotten corners of history. Because sometimes the most powerful men are the ones history tried hardest to erase.